Okay, in my last video, I asked the question, if you are a flat earther, yet you do not believe in the creation account given us in the Bible, then what is your idea of the creation and the future as well? Because we get both aspects. We get the creation, we get the present, we get the future in the Bible. Uh, but Um, if you don't believe the Bible, but yet you believe flat Earth, then explain what you think is the creation account and what we're leading up to. Okay, and so this brings me to my next question: is uh, the current state that we're living in? Okay, how do you? What is your worldview? If you believe that the Earth is flat, but you don't believe the Bible, then how do you see the world as far as um, is it progressing? Uh, are we more advanced than we've ever been, or are we digressing? Are we getting worse and worse? Or would you agree with me that we see a combination of both? Things are getting greater, both good and bad. Um, but specifically, um, what is the power of the world as you see it? Okay, so is it the rich people who have all the power? Is it um, the money itself? Is that the true power of the world? What is the current world situation? Any sort of explanation would be satisfactory to me. I was disappointed that nobody really even offered an explanation for what is the creation account, what is the future, and so more uh, specifically, how do you see the world today? Uh, if you believe in a flat Earth, do you believe that you know the president, whether it's Obama or Bush or whoever the president is, do you believe that they are the true leader of the world and that the fate of mankind rests on that man? Or do you believe it's the Pope in Rome? Do you believe he's the one in charge and he's the fate of the world rests on him? How, if you could, in any possible way, explain the current world that we live in, if you do not believe in the Bible itself? Um, what I see among a lot of atheistic flat earthers is no explanation for anything and no hope, no account for what's happened, no um, no visions of what's gonna happen in the future, and no explanations for the current situation we're in today. Um, the lack of of ideology, the lack of ideology among atheistic flat earthers is uh, maybe I'm just out of the loop, but I ain't seeing nothing from these guys other than to reject. Uh, that's almost as if their worldview is to reject anything mainstream, which is okay, but at the same time, you got to have some element of truth. What is the truth? If this is a lie and this is a lie and this is a lie, start uh, explaining some of the truth. And I don't think people are putting enough pressure on these guys to show us the truth. And so that's what that's really kind of a vague as possible question for atheistic flat earthers. But I think people need to start putting some pressure on these guys. And even if you're one of them, put pressure on yourself to come up with these answers. Okay, so I'm going to show you some truth. I'm just going to go over uh, some things that I've recently gone over. Okay, and specifically like the, the Caucasoid, the Negroid, and the Mongoloid as being tied in with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, and I plan on continuing this for a little bit because I think there's a little bit more to uncover, and it's very, very interesting. It's more interesting than what I first imagined. But first, before we get into that, excuse me, you see here on the screen here the Douay Rheims in Isaiah 40 verse 22. It says, "It is he that sitteth upon the globe of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as locusts. He that stretcheth out the heavens as nothing, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in." Now think about this. Okay, so you are somebody who thinks that you have to go to gurus to know what God really says. In other words, you can't rely on the English. That's what you think. Okay, if you're one of those persons. Okay, you think you can't rely on persons, but you have to rely on these majestic gurus who are all knowing. You think you got to rely on them to know what the Word of God is in some foreign language that is not a living language today. Okay, so in other words, this language here, uh, this English language is insufficient in your opinion. You think that, well, God can't possibly speak in English. Or you have the opinion that there is absolutely no such thing as a corrupt Bible. Okay, so neither one of those are true. But I just want to show this example right here as an English version that you should absolutely know cannot be true. This is absolutely false. And so I could give you much more evidence than this, but just something to think about. You can't look at that verse, be a flat earther, and say that all Bibles are true, because that's obviously not true, and that should to some effect offend you in some sort of way, because you know it's not true. You know these guys are lying. The Douay Rheims, the Catholic people, are lying about the Bible. And so I think if you're wise and you skillful, you can uh, collate all these different verses or all these different Bible versions, and you can see that there's errors in every single Catholic version, every single modern version in the English language, and there's only one Bible that has zero errors, and you know what Bible that is. I don't even have to tell you. Okay, and so just logically speaking, if you believe in a God, if you believe a God can resurrect the dead, then you ought to believe that God can preserve his word, and that's exactly the promise that we're given all throughout the Bible, and specifically in Psalm 12. And um, it should mean something to you if you truly are a believer, that if you do truly view God as precious, and that the words of the Lord are pure words, pure, perfect, they're incorruptible. Okay, so where do we get these pure words if they're not, if they have to be in your language? So where do we find them in our language? And you can't say they're in every Bible or a mixture, combination of Bibles. But the problem is, if you say, well, some Bibles contain some truth and other Bibles contain other truths. Excuse me. The Then you don't have a complete single Bible to as your foundation. Okay, so you got to have one Bible that's perfect. Otherwise, why aren't you out there rewriting your own Bible in the English language that is perfect? Okay, and so you want to base it off uh, Greek or Hebrew uh, scriptures. Well, okay, fine, but what scriptures are you talking about? What manuscripts are you talking about specifically? Or even the challenge would be, what name a book in another language that's perfect? Yeah, I would like to hear that, because nobody can ever answer that question. Okay, now back to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, so what I talked about a couple of videos ago was the Caucasoid and the Negroid and the Mongoloid. Okay, now this, in case you missed it, I'll quickly go over All right, so there was these boys that were fishing, and they pulled up a skull out of the water, and um, so the investigators that came and took that skull, the first thing they look for is what kind of skull type is it? Okay, so there's three different types of skulls. Now, if you go back and read your Bible, okay, there's um, after the flood, excuse me. Okay, so after the flood, there was um, Noah, his three sons, and their wives. There's 8 people. Okay, so um, God commanded them to be fruitful and to multiply. Now, um, what happens is that when they get off the ark, only Shem, Ham, and Japheth are the ones who repopulate the earth. Okay, so everybody living today is a descendant of either Shem, Ham, or Japheth. And now the correlation here is that there are only 3 school types in the world today. And so, why do these 3 school types have to be Shem, Ham, and Japheth? Well, okay, this has to be because you can't. 2 Caucasoids can't make a Negroid, and 2 Negroids can't make a Mongoloid, and 2 Mongoloids can't make a Caucasoid, and so forth. So it has to be that Shem, Ham, and Japheth were 3 different skull types, and from those 3, we we get the whole entire world. Okay, you see what I'm getting at? So no matter how many times 2 Caucasoids reproduce, they'll never reproduce a Negroid or a Mongoloid. Okay, so you can, yeah, a Caucasoid and a Negroid can have children, but their children will only have the skull type of one or the other. It won't be a variation of the two. They might have other type of characteristics that are similar to both the Caucasoid and the Negroid. For example, skin color. Maybe one's really white and another one's really black, and then the combination of those two will produce a lighter colored, in between color. That's natural. That's a variation. That's very probable, but they're only going to have one of the 2 skull types. Can't be a variation of both. Okay, so because of that fact, because there are 3 skull types that are sort of um, unchangeable in a sense, we know those 3 had to come from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. There's no question about it. And if I was really smart, I'd figure out which one was which one of these was Shem, which one of these was Ham, and which one of these is Japheth. I got an idea, but I want to make sure I know before I even say anything at all. But it's very interesting, I think, in my opinion. And so that's all I really want to share with you today. I think I've gone on too long the way it is. Uh, Hopefully, I can put up more of these videos uh, on a daily basis or every other day. But in the comment section, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to comment. Uh, Whatever you have to say, let's hear it. I want to hear your thoughts on either the atheistic flat earther on that, whether you're for or against, whatever, don't matter. I want to hear what your thoughts are because I don't think it's being talked about enough. And I think if people are really smart and they'll figure it out. They'll figure out the truth. The truth, if they're really guided by the truth, and they they have. If you're smart, in my opinion, you care about the truth above all else. You can be slow-witted, you can be unlearned, but you can at the same time be very smart in the sense that you desire the truth. It all depends on your definition of smart. You could be a brainiac and know all the textbooks and know it and got straight A's in school and be dumber than a box of rocks. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not putting the truth above all else. So these sorts of people typically are very prideful, and uh, and because of that pride, um, they uh, limit themselves on what they can learn. Okay, and now, and the Bible even tells us this. In ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Okay, think about it.